Hello my lovelies and welcome back to my channel. I'm Heather and this is the happenings with H.A.P. It's been a while. It is 2022. I haven't filmed anything in a very, very long time. And while I'm sorry about that, I also just didn't feel like filming at the time. I don't know. I was burnt out on it. I don't know. So I really have no excuse. You will be seeing this makeup a lot in the coming videos, except for probably a lip change and a costume change because I am doing a batch filming today. When this video is going to go up, I'm not 100% sure, but it will be the first. And I don't want to waste your time. So today I'm going to be talking about all of the rest of the books that I read in 2021. So it's like a fall winter 2021 recent reads, because after that, my next videos will be about my favorites and least favorites of 2021. So it doesn't make sense to post those yet when I still have to talk about a few of the books that I read in 2021 to close out the year. So that's what this video is about. So let's get into the video. So all of these are the books I've read from September through December. So it's not a lot of them, but we're gonna go dive in a little bit to them. So the first book that I finished in September is Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. Now, I'm a huge fan of Aiden Thomas's other work, Cemetery Boys, so I had high hopes going into this, but unfortunately it really kind of didn't live up to the excellence of the previous book. This book follows Wendy, who is the heroine of Peter Pan, and in this universe, Peter Pan is a real being. Wendy and her brothers had gone missing when they were younger, and Wendy came back, but her brothers didn't, and she doesn't really remember anything about the time that they were gone. And now currently there are disappearances of children happening in her town again, and she's trying to get to the bottom of it when Peter Pan shows up. So this is a bit of a mystery. Wendy is much older in this, so I want to say it was 18, but I honestly don't remember. It's been so long. So she's kind of coming to grips with the fact that, oh, Peter Pan from the stories is real, and that she also may have met him when she was a little girl. Combined with that of her trying to figure out where her little brothers are and what happened to her and them is kind of the main plot of the book. I really liked the kind of twist, though I saw it coming, because if you know any Peter Pan theories, you kind of can probably figure out where this book is going to go. But what actually happens changes it up a little bit. But again, if you've done any deep dive analysis into what Peter Pan means, the stories and all that, and what it might be representative of, you might get an idea of where this book goes. Like I said, it wasn't bad. I gave it a 3.5 stars, but it really kind of fell flat compared to the other book of his I read, which is a tall order. I get it. It is what it is, but I did enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I had hoped I would. The next book I finished in September was Ace of Spades by Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé. This one I actually had a lot of high hopes for because I had heard nothing but great things, and this is Faridah's debut novel, and it really was an awesome read. I gave it 4.5 stars, so it just did not get to the 5-star point, and most of that had to do with the ending. I really enjoyed this book, though it is kind of jumping on the train of the Get Out meets blank type of narrative. So in this case, it was Get Out meets Gossip Girl. I know that that's kind of now becoming like a bit of a cliche. This is the second book I've read with that plot point, and actually another book in September that I read also had a similar type of plot point. It's getting a bit cliched, but if a writer does it well, I don't care. And this one is done well. So it follows Giamacca and Devon, who are the only two Black students in Nivea's private academy where they attend school. They both are very good at academics. Giamacca is, I believe, supposed to be valedictorian, if I remember correctly. And Devon is kind of like right up there, though Giamacca comes from very academic, well-off parents, while Devon is just with his mother and younger brother, if I believe. Again, I read this in September. It's been a while. Text messages start to come up and go to all the students in the school about Giamacca and Devon, and they're trying to figure out who is sending these messages and how they know so much intimate information, because a lot of the things they're sending could essentially lead to them being expelled from school, which would ruin their prospects for the future. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm not going to go too far into the plot, but the reason I did not give it 5 stars was primarily because because of the ending. And that's, I feel like, the problem with these books. There's really no way to have a very satisfying ending that lives up to the trauma these characters go through, because what they go through is pretty fucking traumatic, and also is satisfying to the reader, as well as being realistic to the world created. And the ending kind of just threw me off, because I'm just like, well, that kind of put a bow and a band-aid on a problem, but not really. But again, I don't really know how you could end these books in a way that's at least semi-satisfying, unfortunately. But this was written very well. I was very intrigued. There were, some plot points that I saw coming, and then others that I was like, oh. And it is told from both Chiamaka and Devon's POVs. So we get to see things from their past and their present before they kind of meet up together. So we get to experience what's going on through both of their point of views. Because they are the only two Black kids in the school, you really get the sense of isolation and paranoia that they're going through, and rightfully so, because they have a very valid reason to be paranoid. Again, I really enjoyed this. I'm really kind of wanting a sequel to this, because like I said, it was wrapped up, but not really. But regardless, I'm really looking forward to Faridah's next novel, because I really did enjoy this one a lot. The last book that I read in September was White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson, and this was kind of my pre-October really spooky read, and it lived up to that. So the novel follows Marigold and her blended family as they move from California to a Midwest city of Cedarville, because her mother got a writing job, basically a job to teach writing and then work on her own work. And they're supposed to live in this house, I think, for like 3 years. And it's a house on Maple Street, which for anyone that watches The Twilight Zone, there's never anything good about a street that's named after a tree. Marigold has already had issues. She got in trouble with her family due to a drug overdose that her little stepsister and little brother witnessed, and tensions are already high between her and her stepfather, who is white, as is her stepsister. So there's also that kind of racial dynamics going on as well. And while she is the oldest child in this blended family, her parents really don't trust her much at all based on what happened. And Marigold suffers from extreme anxiety. Part of that was a reason that I gave this only a 4.5 stars, just because her anxiety, homegirl needs therapy, like really bad. Like, she had a bedbug scare one time, which is very valid. It's something to be scared of, but literally every teeny tiny thing she believes is bedbugs, and she like freaks out about it. And back in California, she used weed to like calm herself, but she clearly needs some other type of help. However, the anxiety that's present also is making her more aware of the issues that are going on in the house. She's very much seeing things and hearing things and smelling things that are happening inside this house, and it is pretty freaky. Like, I will give Tiffany D. Jackson wrote one of my favorite books I read in 2020, which was Monday's Not Coming. So she knows how to build up a thriller, and she knows how to be atmospheric, and this book is all about atmosphere. And I mean, her little stepsister Piper is a creepy little child and brings that energy to it too. Like, there's a lot to love about this. Again, it is a Get Out meets House on Haunted Hill type of story, so we do have that kind of background going into it. And while I do think that the ending of this one was a bit more satisfying, again, there's not really many ways to end this type of a story and have it be truly satisfying. I feel like this possibly could have a part 2 and it would make sense, but that was kind of where, again, it lost a little bit of points for stars for me. It was kind of the ending, and just Marigold's character, just she needed way more help than she was receiving from her family. But if you're looking for a very good atmospheric spooky read, this is definitely it. I really enjoyed it, and I did find how do I say this without giving it away? But I think in this book, with what was going on in the community and what had been happening, it was better thought out and executed, more so than When No One's Watching, which just felt like a bit of a whiplash. Like, this clearly had a longer game that made more sense to me, which I think is why I found the ending a bit more satisfying. I wasn't as displeased with the ending as I've been in past Get Out / whatever type of books. So I think of the 3 I've read, this had the most satisfying ending. I just didn't really love Marigold as a character, only because being inside her head just gave me freaking anxiety, and I feel like she needs a little bit more help than she was getting. But overall, I really did enjoy this one a lot, and I'm a huge fan of Tiffany D. Jackson. I gotta finish up reading her bibliography, because I absolutely love her writing. So if you followed my channel for a bit, you know October is typically my Stephen King month, and that's because I'm trying to go through the man's bibliography because he has like 1,000 books. Will I ever finish? Probably not. And I had debated on whether I wanted to read a couple of books by him that are his shorter books or go for one of the big bad boys. And I decided to go for one of the big bad boys, and I decided to read It by Stephen King. I did the audiobook for this one, and it was like like a 30 to 40 hour audiobook. So it literally took me October and a little bit into November to actually finish, but I'm counting it in October because I read the bulk of it in October. It was good. I gave it a 4 stars. It's just too long. Like, it could have really had done with some cuts that would have had nothing to do with the narrative. The narrative could have been almost completely intact, and still nothing would have happened. It's a very long book. I had already watched, the adaptations, and I really enjoyed the fact that the most recent one was probably the closest adaptation, but there were still a lot of differences involved. I feel like King writes children very well, which, if you know anything about this, you kind of know what happens with the kids. It's just like a very no-filtered way without babying kid writing, because I feel like that can be kind of a trap when people write children. They just write them almost too young. And they're also not these sweet little innocent darlings either. And I feel like every time he writes children, I'm like, yeah, I feel like this is an actual child you're writing. And then when he writes adults, I'm like, yes, that's a very much an adult perspective. And I just haven't found too many writers that have done that. Like I said, his stuff is very dark and it deals with very heavy topics, but there's something about when he writes children that just seems very realistic to me. And I actually very much enjoy a lot of the books that deal with children characters. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It's just, it was way too long, and I'm not going to go into the plot because I feel like most people know the plot. Killer clown, children, they come back when they're adults. That's pretty much what it's about, and then it's about other stuff too. With anything else Stephen King, there is underlying things, and a lot of this one has to do with growing up and loss of innocence and kind of reclaiming your childhood, even if it was bad or not, and not letting it ruin your adulthood, stuff like that. So like there's a lot involved, which is why I gave it the higher rating that I did. It could have had a couple hours cut. Yeah. In November, I finally read a very much anticipated book for me, and unfortunately, it ended up being a little bit of a letdown, and that was Lovely War by Julie Berry. I was really expecting to love this one. I was expecting this one to be a 5-star for me. It has 2 things, historical fiction and mythology, both I really love, but there was just something about it that I didn't. It's told in 2 separate timelines. You have the World War I narrative with Hazel and James, and then you have Aphrodite and the other gods in the World War II era, and she's like on trial talking about an example of like love during war or something. Honestly, I would have been happier if the whole plot with Aphrodite was gone. It didn't add anything to the narrative for me. Like every time we went back to the Hazel James story, I'm like, okay, great. And it's a very sweet like love story during wartime. It's not the best I've read in regards to like historical fiction war love stories. It's definitely not. I've read way better. But I still enjoyed that aspect of it, but having to go back to the Aphrodite thing, and I'm just like, I don't care. Okay, you guys are manipulating all these people. Good for you. Great. And all these other gods go on trial with her as like witnesses, and like they tell their own stories about other characters like Aubrey, who also weaves their way into the main lover's narrative. I did like the fact that it dealt with like PTSD and shell shock and all that stuff after the war, which I feel like most historical fiction, especially around war and romance, does not really deal with. So that was actually really cool. Again, I would have liked to have seen more of that. I would have just been very happy with a nice World War I story with the characters that were involved, and that they could be a bit fleshed out, and maybe it not being as a bit cliche as it was. And I know that people like love this book, so I know this is going to be a very hot take, but it is what it is. The next book that I read in November was a long-awaited sequel, though I'd only read the first book a few years ago, so it wasn't that long for me, but I know for others it was very long. And that is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Alire Sáenz. This is the sequel to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which I absolutely adored that book. This one was really great to kind of get back into the swing of Aristotle and Dante's relationship. The issue I had with this book, and why I gave it 4.5 stars, beautifully written, everything was great there. There's not really anything that happens. There is one major plot point that happens, and I'm not going to spoil it because it is a major one and it kind of was a whiplashy one. But otherwise, like, not much happens. It's just kind of them going through like their last year of high school together with the realization that their relationship may not go on. This is a very real topic, especially in the time period that this takes place in, which is, I believe, I want to say it's late 80s, early 90s. You know, two gay men being together is still a huge issue. However, both sets of their parents are okay with this relationship. So that's very interesting. It's mostly about Ari kind of coming to terms with who he is as a person and his relationship to Dante. And again, like I said, nothing really happens, unlike in the first one where they had the drama of the start of their relationship and they're realizing their feelings for each other. Aside from Ari kind of freaking out about things, it's pretty smooth sailing for their relationship, except for the fact that obviously they're not going to be going to the same schools and stuff like that. So that's very real world. And a lot of kids that have had high school romances had to deal with this, but I guess I like more angst in my books, if I'm being 100% honest, because I'm sure a lot of people will give this 5 stars. And like I said, I give it a 4.5. It's just, I kind of was hoping for more of a plot besides kind of just their day to day. And actually, like, I kind of would have rather most of this book been like maybe in the first half, and then the second half is them post-graduation, so we could kind of see that relationship a bit more and like how complex it will become. It does end with like a nice little bow, and I really do love Dante and Aristotle and their relationship. I really do. I just, from a book perspective, and it is kind of a decent length of a book, I just wanted a bit more plot, a bit more issues that they were dealing with. Everything was very much just kind of coasting by, and things are really good. And where they're growing up and who they are, it just seems like there should have been a bit more, you know, issues that they're dealing with. This is my own personal opinion. I did really love it. It's just, these are me nitpicking because I can't give everything a 5-star, unfortunately. But I did really enjoy it, and I think that if you are a fan of the first book, you're definitely gonna love this book. I just like the first one more, if I'm being honest. So December, I finally got to read the last book in the Montague siblings trilogy, The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks by Mackenzi Lee. It took forever. This book was delayed for well over a year. I think it was supposed to come out in 2020. I think March or April 2020. It got bumped to November, December, and then it got bumped again to March, April 2021, and then it got bumped to now finally November, December 2021. So like, it's been a ride. I've been waiting for this book forever. I love the first 2 books in this series. I love the characters. And now we finally get a book from Adrian's perspective, who is the baby brother of Monty and Felicity. And yes, Monty, Felicity, and Percy are in this book. All of them actually with pretty significant parts. I didn't think that there would be as much of them in this as there was, but I'm glad that we got to see like all 3 siblings together. And Monty as like a late 30-something-year-old is just, it's amazing. It's everything you could want. Ugh, I love Monty as a character. He's so funny. Adrian has his own little baggage. Adrian has a lot of social anxiety. It's very bad. I love the fact that he has a very healthy, understanding relationship despite his mental health issues that he has, and despite the fact that his father kind of doesn't really think very highly of his son, because that just seems to be how their father is. And this follows Adrian trying to figure out what happened to his mother, who died years ago when he was, I think he was 8 or 10 years old, and he was told that she fell off a cliff, and he'd never really believed that that was true. And it leads him to this spyglass piece that he has that belonged to his mother, and his mother was obsessed with it. And so it kind of leads him to try to figure out if the spyglass is related to some other sort of mythology, and that's how he sets out on his quest and meets the rest of his siblings, which unfortunately he never knew existed. I don't want to give anything away. It was a lovely conclusion. I'm very, very sad I won't get to read more of these characters, but this book definitely had the nice conclusion that I think we all deserved as fans of the Montague siblings, and I'm just sad it's over, but I really, really love them, and I really can't wait for Mackenzi Lee's next project. Worth the wait. This was a 5-star for me. I absolutely loved it, and I'm so glad I finally got to read it. The next book that I read is also the third book in a series, ironically enough, and it is Well Matched by Jen DeLuca, and it is the third book in the Well Met rom-com series. I love this freaking series. I don't know why I love it as much as I do. It is set in the Renaissance Fair, and this book follows April, who was Emily's older sister and was pretty prominent in the first book, not as much in the second, and her relationship with another character that we already know, Mitch. I'm not really giving anything away. Basically, the plot line of this is Mitch asks her to become his pretend girlfriend when he goes to a family reunion, and stuff ensues. And I really love that so far each book in this series has like had a different romance trope. So like the first one, Well Met, was an enemies to lovers, and then Well Played was like miscommunication, Cyrano type of thing, and then this one is a fake relationship type of trope. So it's really fun. So if you like any of those types of tropes and you want like steamy scenes and really fun characters, I really suggest this. It is a quick read. It's very fun and sweet and just everything you want in a contemporary romance novel. There apparently will be a fourth one, and of course I will be reading that because I can't get enough of this series, and I'm gonna be sad when they eventually end because I'm sure they're gonna have to eventually, but I don't want them to. We are finally here. We are at the last book that I read in December, and thus the last book that I read in 2021, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I have heard many people on Book Talk go crazy about this book, and so I kind of went in with very high hopes, and they were met pretty good. I gave this a solid 4 stars. It follows Linus, who is a caseworker in this kind of very nondescript either city or state or country, I'm not 100% sure. And essentially he's a social worker for magical children that are in orphanages. And people that have magical powers are kind of, I want to say, like tracked in this society because they have special type of powers that some people don't, which makes them a threat. It's very kind of X-Men in a way. The House in the Cerulean Sea has a bunch of children that are very extraordinary, that aren't typically in orphanages, and are magical beings that he's never really encountered ever. Some of them don't really even know what type of species these children are. It follows him when he's supposed to stay there for about a month to see that this orphanage is being run well, and he gets to know the children and the caretaker, Arthur Panassis, and just his experiences with these children and him kind of coming to realize maybe the life he's kind of led up to this point really had no purpose. There is very much a found family and a very sweet quality about this. I loved all the children's like different personalities, especially Lucy, who cracked me up a lot, but it was also very sweet. I'm not going to really go into the children and their powers just because it's a really fun surprise. Like I went in not knowing literally anything about this, so even me giving this type of synopsis I think kind of is a little much, but it was really sweet. It was a really sweet story. You know, it was very wholesome as well. It's very wholesome found family type of a novel with a bit of urban fantasy involved. I think I had a little bit too high of expectations because of BookTube and Book Talk and all that, but I did really enjoy this one. It's a really fun read, and if you like fantasy and like found family and kids with magical powers and stuff like that, I recommend reading this if you want something that will really just kind of like warm your heart and have a little bit of social commentary as well, because there is some in there too. Well, that is finally it for my first video back and the last bunch of books that I read in 2021. I will be doing normal wrap-ups monthly like I used to, because this is very hard and I feel kind of bad that I can't give a bit more of a synopsis because I don't really remember everything that I read because it was so long ago. So we will go back to the monthly ones now that I'm, I think, more settled and happier to film. So thank you so much to everyone that has subscribed and liked and everything else and commented. I really do appreciate it. I do read it and I really much appreciate it. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.